So, welcome back once again to Third Age Reforged, into another battle replay, and probably this one will be the last one on 0.95, all things considered, based on my schedule and based on the fact that the hotfix for 0.96 should be out relatively soon. So, again, and this one will actually be the one that I showed first on 0.95, because this is Umbar, so it's one of the... I think this is counted as a cityscape map in the sort of list where you pick what map you want to play on. But it does act as a siege most of the time, because obviously it is a settlement surrounded by the natural walls and some elevation as well. But in this situation, it's actually going to be a battle where half of the city is under control of the invaders and half of it is under control of the defenders. So that's going to be quite an interesting thing, because usually Umbar is a settlement in the defenders. You need to sort of pick what side you're going to focus on a little bit more. So for example, last time I showed this map off, this side over here that I'm circling now was the side where the defenders decided to make their last stand, whereas the first time I ever played on it, it was over this side. But here, that won't be an issue, because it will be essentially a case of trying to attack across the river or defend your own side. And, well, we'll see how it goes. But we'll start off with the blue team, and this is, of course, the forces of Umbar, who are the... they might end up being the attackers in this situation, to be honest with you. They might be a little bit more well-suited to being on the offensive. But it is their city, of course, their home that they must defend. And here on this side we have a lucky hussar. He's got some Belagaya footmen here at the front. Very good, heavily armoured spears. Again, they're not going to be too fantastic at getting kills, but they will hold the line very well for you, provided they are backed up by something which is a little bit more suited to facing infantry. And they will be pretty decent against cavalry, of course, with that anti-cavalry bonus. Having a go here, we've also got some Corsair archers, which are currently hiding. And Corsair archers, they're honestly over 500 florins is kind of expensive, all things considered, but an archer that can hide can be utilised very effectively, although here, of course, there's not really a great deal of opportunities for ambushes within the city. It's not impossible, but it's more likely to be more of a factor on the outside of the walls than inside it. Over here we have some more Corsair archers, so again, they are cheaper than all the other Umbar archers, so it's understandable why it's brought them, but really, Umbar's archers, like the Belagaya archers over here, are more suited for sustained combat with enemy archers. They are very good in a skirmish fight. They have that buckler, of course, which means they do have a shield value, and they have good armor values as well. They don't have the highest base damage, which can be an issue if you need to get a lot of kills very quickly with your ranged units, but nonetheless, Umbar are more about their defensive values with their skirmishers and with most of their infantry units, to be honest with you. And over here we also have the Belagaya halberds, of course. As a halberdier goes, they're probably not quite as good as the Etalond halberdiers from Dol Amroth, but they're like the next row down. They are cheaper as well than that sort of thing, and I like them. I honestly think that most of the time you're going to be seeing the Belagaya halberds in the Umbar army, because it gives them that armor piercing. It gives them a very solid front line. It's not going to be the easiest thing to push your way through, or to try and sort of wear down through attrition, which Umbar, of course, are very, very good at. As we move further back, we get into some of the lucky hussars, more elite infantry. We have the Castamir's Chosen. Of course, having 4 of these before the cost increases is a big boon to Umbar. It means that if you choose to, your infantry is going to be able to go toe-to-toe with pretty much any other faction in the game. Even the likes of Gundabad and the Dwarves won't be able to roll over Umbar as quickly as they would several of the other kingdoms of men. And, the Castamir's Chosen, of course, very big part of that. They are quite expensive, but in certain situations they can definitely be worth it. It does look like a lucky hussar has brought all 4 Castamir's Chosen, so he's definitely gone for a little bit more quality in terms of his shielded infantry, which may very well help him here in the more atrocious city fighting that's going to be going on. Corsair Savages as well, pretty much the polar opposite. They are lower tier. They are also AP Axemen, of course, quite cheap. They've got like those Wolverine claws as well. Can be useful. They can they can pay for themselves quite easily, but they can also be focused down by archers, of course, which is the bane of the Umbar's lower tier units. The Corsairs, of course, not so good. More Castamir's Chosen. And then back here we have the General's Bodyguard unit, the masked version of Castamir, riding with his Harbingers. And the Harbingers are, of course, a very good unit. They don't have the most men in the unit, though, and an elite infantry unit like this can sometimes struggle to pay for itself, but in this sort of situation, in the city fighting, provided they're in a blob, they should do relatively well. And then as we look up here, we have some more halberds. That's pretty much it for a lucky hussar's army. So now we shall move on to the green player, the one who sent me the replay, and that is Engsfitz. Again, I think they're probably going to have similar armies, Umbar, so I'll go through the other 3 a little bit more quickly. We have some Belagaya footmen, of course. I think they actually have the armour upgrade because they have the additional chainmail on the outside, so they're going to be even tougher than they otherwise would be. Over here, good to see the Abrazanim Najib Tariq, because they, of course, are an anti-army unit. They don't have the highest base attack values, But they also have the armor upgrade, so they're going to be very tough to take down. And also they have a good shield value as well. And against the faction that they're up against, one of their hated enemies, armor piercing is going to be very useful indeed. And over here we have more Balagaya footmen. And you can see over here that he's also got some stakes here deployed across the bridge with some Balagaya archers, some footmen and some halberds all mixed in together. As we have a look over here, more halberds, good to see all of this AP. I think that's probably the way to go considering his opponents, which we'll get onto in a moment. More Balagaya units. As we have a look further back here, we can also see another unit of Abrazanim Nadu Tariq with their armor upgrade. And then as we move back over to here, this is where the core of his infantry lies. He's got some Castamir's Chosen, and then his general's bodyguard is the Naruna Aru Royal Guard. Of course, they are not as deadly as the Harbingers of Castamir, but they are tougher. They are more difficult to take down. They can, of course, form up their formation, get into a position with their defences, and they'll be very difficult to take down indeed. They aren't AP anymore though, so that is worth saying, but they are still a very, very strong unit, and they can really help hold the line together very well. But of course, sending your general in could be seen as a bit of a desperation move. And well, as we move over to the outside of the settlement, I think this is this a ford? I think it is. Based on the rocks that are here, this may very well be a route across, which will be interesting to behold. We can see Diatrap, who has got a front line here with Castamir's Chosen and some Belagaya halberdiers. And more Castamir's Chosen and halberdiers, so this is a very good front line. I do like the mixture of halberds and Castamir's Chosen. Castamir's Chosen are not AP, which is pretty much their only downside, but their base stats are very high for a unit of their type. And if you can back them up with the pole arms and the AP of the Belagaya halberdiers, it's a very tough front line to take on, particularly in a cramped environment like this one. Going across a river, it'll be very, very good for Umbar if they can get the right engagement. And over here, his general is also in a unit of Naruna Aru Royal Guard, so again, focusing a little bit more on survivability than their attacking prowess. Corsair Savages as well. More AP, of course, cheaper than most units. He's actually got a lot of Corsair Savages, which, you know, in this sort of environment, if the enemy has gone for a lot of archers, that might well work against Diatrap here, but we shall see. He's actually brought a catapult though, which I actually like here, because in this sort of situation, this will force the enemies to attack across the river. He's also got a quick way into the settlement should he need to retreat, which is it's a very good position for Diatrap to be in here, because he can force the enemy to come to him, and if they start to break his front line, he can retreat to the side of his allies and get to a more defensible position. And then he's got some more Castamir's Chosen, and he's got a couple of units of Belagaya archers, so he can put the pressure on in other ways as well. And then finally, over here we have the final army, Boyd, playing also as Umbar, of course, 4 Umbarim armies. This is actually a somewhat lore-friendly encounter. We have some Belagaya archers again, of course, very cost-effective unit, you'll see them quite a lot. He's the first one to have brought the crossbow Corsairs though, and this is another unit I really like, because they are very deadly. Their ammunition is very strong. You know, they're going to be able to bring down a lot of troops. They're very good against cavalry as well, which in this sort of situation might come into it. But they can hide as well, which means their primary weakness, of course, is that they can be focused down by archers. But because they can hide, the archers are not going to be able to target them until you give an attack order, which is very, very useful, because it means the enemy has to bait them out of hiding first of all. And if Umbar are being cautious and want to gun down cavalry, you're not going to be able to force them out of hiding with anything other than sending your cavalry into harm's way, which is why I really like them. In this situation as well, their AP missiles will be very useful, and they are in a pretty good position as well. They've got a nice hill over here. As we move down here, we've got some Belagaya halberds as well, forming up some semblance of a line here, because some Corsair archers as well. So quite a lot of hidden units out here for Boyd, which is probably where they're most useful here in more open ground, so the enemy is lulled into a sense of false security. And here we have some Corsair Savages as well, a lot of them, a lot of AP. As we move a little bit further back, we can also see that there's quite a lot of Belagaya footmen and some Castamir's Rangers, the first ones who have brought the Rangers, and obviously their body piercing is incredibly dangerous if you allow them to get good shots off. They are better against lightly armoured targets, but even against heavily armoured targets, if it's a dense enough cluster, they can still do a lot of damage, as evidenced by the way that the Guardians of Khan Doom died in the last battle. We've also got some Castamir's Chosen over here. Looks like a pretty long line of Castamir's Chosen, to be honest. I think that's pretty much it, although I'm not seeing his general's bodyguard. Oh wait, his general's bodyguard is way back here. And this is a unit of Harbingers. So yeah, no cavalry actually from Umbar, which is interesting. I would kind of have expected some cavalry, particularly for the outer players here. The Warlords are a very good unit, and considering that all 4 attacking armies are Gondor, Umbar would have the cavalry advantage. Let's have a look here. So we have Bretonk 342, and he is of course playing as Gondor, as I just said. He's got a lot of, obviously, the standard Gondorian troops are going to make up the heart and soul of any Gondor army. So he has got over here some Gondor archers, Gondor spearmen, and Gondor infantry. Interestingly enough, the philosophy of Umbar and Gondor is not too dissimilar with regards to their core, at least in terms of their spears and their archers. Spears are going to be very good at holding, the archers are going to be very good at absorbing fire. The difference comes in that Gondor don't have an equivalent really to the Castamir's Chosen, but they do have strengths in other areas. Their Gondor infantry is obviously not as good as the Castamir's Chosen, but it is cheaper, and you can bring them in greater numbers. So, interesting to see how that will work out. We've also got some more Gondor infantry over here, and some Ramas Ekor Garrison, which are of course the militia tier unit for Gondor, so just a bit of spare money to buy an extra unit. Obviously he's brought a Trebuchet as well, and the Trebuchet could very well prove to be a real problem for either Boyd, or it looks like the Trebuchet is actually turning their attention onto Deer Trap, which is not a bad target because Deer Trap is a little bit more congested, and they've probably got better shots, honestly, because Boyd has done the very smart thing in that he has spread his line out a little bit more widely, so the Trebuchet is unlikely to get more value from them. Over here at the front we have a couple of units of Caer Andros Marksmen, which are essentially much better variants of the Gondor archers. They've got, I think, more range. They certainly have more armour and more missile damage, and I think as well they're the most accurate of the Gondorian archers. They don't have the longest range of the Gondorian archers, but they are still a very, very strong unit indeed. Very difficult to skirmish with. I would not recommend it most of the time. Skirmishing with Gondor is not the nicest of tasks, and I would say that they're probably even worse to skirmish against than Umbar. Possibly, anyway. It depends really on Umbar. Gondor have certainly got the more variety of archers that are good against other archers, but it depends really on what sort of comp you bring, I suppose. Some Ramas Ekor Garrison archers as well. Now this is another unit which is, again, very difficult to skirmish with, because while they're not as tough as the standard Gondorian archers, they do still have a shield value, and their armor values are not bad for a militia archer unit. We've got some more spears over here as well, a lot of spears, and a couple of units of infantry as well. So this is actually quite a heavy ranged presence. I mean, honestly, it might be worth Boyd's time to just sort of charge right across the river and try and close them down as quickly as possible, because their infantry is going to be no match for the Castamir's Chosen and the Savages. But his general, the general is actually in a unit of Wardens of Minas Ithil, which obviously is a very strong ranger unit. They can be focused down, however, because there aren't very many of them. They're multiple HP, but generally they're better when they are unnoticed, and unfortunately putting the general in this unit means they can't hide, so it takes away one of the big selling points of a ranger unit. But they are quite far back, and really if they're just sort of working on trying to wear down Umbar, they won't be deployed until later on when Umbar doesn't have any men left anyway. Over here we can see Rex White Wolf, who is deploying some of his troops over closer towards Bretonks, and he's got a lot of Fountain Guard and Shielded Fountain Guard. This is really the one unit of each, I think, but definitely the strongest of the Gondorian units in my opinion. The Shielded Fountain Guard are the unit which, if I had to pick an infantry unit as my general's bodyguard, I would always go for the Shielded Fountain Guard over the other two options, because they're just too good to pass up. They're a fantastic unit, and the regular Fountain Guard are also very, very strong. In fact, I'd say the regular Fountain Guard are probably the most important unit in Gondor's roster as it stands at the moment. A couple of units of Gondor archers, good for skirmishing of course. We've also got some Pelagia Marines, of course, with those javelins, which is going to be very useful. I didn't see any Corsair Blackguards, so they might have the javelin game to themselves. A couple of units of Gondor infantry as well. And over here, some Axemen of Lasarnak for that AP damage, which will be useful against Umbar. And Gondor don't have the most AP options outside their Fountain Guard. Over here we have the front line of White Wolf, who is going to have to either advance or retreat from Deer Trap on the other side. He's got a combination of spears and infantry, of course. Over here he does have a unit of Caer Andros Swordmasters, which could be pretty useful against some of the Umbar units which have lower skill. But if they come up against some of the AP missiles or the Abrazani Nadi Tariq, they will start to take some casualties pretty quickly. And some Gondor archers. Moving on to the third army, we have Noah the Ranger, who's actually deployed outside of the settlement, although I think that comes more from the fact that the available deployment zone he had was relatively small, although he could have deployed in here. And honestly, this gives license for Engsfits to come in and try and take over this side of the river, which will be bad for his ally if he finds himself surrounded. But he does have a lot of infantry and spears which he can move quickly, of course. Several units of archers, and his general is in the only cavalry unit we've seen thus far, the Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard. Very strong lancers, very high armour and shield values, but don't get them involved in a cav fight with knights, because they will fall apart pretty quickly. And then over here, I think, actually this is Muro's bodyguard, so he's also got a unit of Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard over here. Is this the entire army? I find that somewhat hard to believe. I imagine he's got some sort of ambush plan, so he must have some sort of ranger presence here in the settlement or with his main army. And then finally, as we said before with Moreau's units, he's got some guards of Osgiliath, which is good to see. The Gondorian pikemen, very effective of course, with the Fountain Guard, so Gondor leveraging their polearm advantage in a heavy way. Pelagai Marines as well, and then the front line is made up mainly of infantry and axemen. He's also got a ballista up on this hill, which will kind of force a lucky Hussar's hand here. He'll either need to retreat or fall back because he doesn't have any artillery of his own. So, without further ado, let us begin. Rather elongated introduction there. You can see here that the trebuchet is going to be firing over onto Deertrap's position. Again, it's always a good idea to go for the more densely packed formations, and this is where a formation like Boyd's does help a lot, because if you're that spread out, it's going to be very difficult for a trebuchet to get value up. And actually the trebuchet is going to be targeting Boyd's army, and in this situation, honestly, the best way to deal with artillery sometimes is just to spread your army as thin as you possibly can and just try and absorb it. Now admittedly that was a grazing hit there, but really the best thing that artillery can do for you as a player, other than potentially sometimes get tons and tons of kills, which is of course a very real possibility, particularly when there's a cityscape like this, but it's also, I always bring artillery to try and force my opponent to come to me, to try and panic them. The amount of kills it gets is kind of secondary to that. Meanwhile, it does actually look like Rex White Wolf is very rapidly moving his men into the settlement. I'm actually not sure if this is a ford. I'm pretty sure it is, based on the fact there's rocks in the river, although I might be wrong about that. But even so, even if it's not, all that means is the numbers advantage is going to be in favour of Umbar over on that section over there, simply because you're going to have an entire army from Deertrap moving over there, as well as a catapult. Meanwhile, you can actually see that the advance from Moreau is coming in here. The ballista is firing its ammunition, presumably into a lucky Hussar as he moves forward. We can see here that the first line coming forwards is the Gondor infantry. They might just be moving up to form a front line because they can absorb arrow fire from the front relatively well, particularly Umbarim archers, which don't have the highest missile damage anyway. Pelagai footmen are moving forwards, which the Gondor infantry should do quite well against, simply because their infantry and spears have got that malice, but with the halberds they will fall apart pretty quickly. Moreau probably needs to send up more than a single unit, and they are also taking archer fire from the Corsairs, which they are good at absorbing archer fire, of course. Not a single one has actually died yet. But even so, they will start to take some casualties as time goes on. You can actually see there are some axemen of the Sarnak moving forward as well, but the presence of the halberds on the front line does slightly worry me here. As we can see the Pelagai halberds doing their best to get themselves into formation as quickly as they possibly can and start to hack away at the Gondorian troops. Meanwhile, as we move over to the other side, we can see that Engsvitz is moving forward. Rex White Wolf's forces, which came into the settlement, trying to sort of form up a battle line over here. You can actually see that there's a huge slew of reinforcements going over towards Moreau's position from the other player, whose name that escapes me for this moment. The Pelagai footmen and halberds were moving across the river. Now they're retreating, which I'm not sure why, because I think if Engsvitz moved forward really aggressively, they could smash this Gondorian position to bits. And honestly, I think Umbar have the advantage here at the moment, because Gondor are kind of split a little bit. And over here as well, I feel as though a nice aggressive push from Umbar on all fronts would be just the thing to start to panic Gondor a little bit here, particularly over here, where the Gondorians have gone for a very skirmish-heavy army. And Umbar have definitely got the infantry advantage over here. They've got all these halberds, they've got a lot of decent infantry units as well. The Castamir's chosen the Savages with more AP as well, so Gondor are definitely not going to like fighting the forces that are over here. But the Spearmen are sort of getting into the front line. The Trebuchet could still be a problem as well if they blob up, to be fair, so maybe they're just sort of hoping the Trebuchet runs out of ammo, and then they will mount an assault. Meanwhile, as we have a look over here, where I'm actually surprised Moreau advanced forward so aggressively into the Umbar front line. He has the ballista, he can force Umbar to come to him. But the Axemen of the Sarnak are trying their best to get some damage done to these Pelagai units. But honestly, the Pelagai halberdiers are going to be really difficult to bring down. And also now with the added addition of these Savages to go axe to axe with the Axemen of the Sarnak, I don't think that this attack is really going to achieve all that much. They will kill some Umbar forces, but they'll lose more than they gain. This shielded Fountain Guard is also sort of setting up a defensive position over here. They do need to be careful they don't get focused down, because again, over a long period of time, even the lower missile damage Umbar archers will manage to take their toll on the shielded Fountain Guard, at least taking out their HP. Now the Athelian Rangers will start to reap quite a bloody harvest over here. Their body piercing will do a huge amount of damage, although I think they're actually going for the Corsair archers, which is a waste of their ammo, to be honest with you. Rangers, I've found, are at their best when you save them for the late game. Well, you can see that Rex White Wolf has sort of fallen back a little bit, and this is where if I was Engsfitz I would just move forward and try and smash him to pieces, because most of the Gondorian reinforcements that have come across over to here are going to be bottled up, and if you can take this area quickly you can form up a defensive position over here, and then you've got sort of bottled Gondor up a little bit, which would be interesting to see how that would work out. Meanwhile, you can actually see that Gondor have advanced across the river, so I give credit to Gondor for being aggressive here, particularly seeing as based on the army compositions I would have thought that they would have to be a little bit more defensive to get the most out of their armies. But the spears and the infantry getting across the river, there's a lot of dead Umbar and Gondor troops here already. The arrows are flying everywhere though, and that's where the majority of the killing power is going to be coming from early on here, definitely not from the likes of just basic spears, although the savages should be able to inflict some decent damage onto this infantry. Some Corsair archers were caught up in melee, there's more savages coming forward. So it's going to be Deer Trap and Boyd with a huge amount of Corsair savages, which, to be honest with you, are not going to stand up well to this Withering Arrow Storm. But if they can get into a melee, then their axes should stand them in pretty good stead. A charge there. Again, some of their own troops were blocking the majority of that charge, but now that they're in melee, those axes should start to deliver some pretty severe pain to their opponents. If you have a look over here, you can see that Gondor are not giving up on this assault just yet, because there's another unit of Gondor infantry that has moved forward. And this front line is not looking quite as solid as it once did. Some of these Gondorians are very isolated, however. You can see that these Athelian Rangers are moving across. I think Gondor really, too much of their forces are sort of trapped in this valley over here. They need to quickly move in and set up a nice position all along this bank, because Engsfitz might well rue the fact that he's not advancing into the city quickly here, because he does have a chance to really inflict some heavy damage onto White Wolf's infantry over there, because it is isolated and it wouldn't stand a chance against an all-out assault. And a lucky Hussar can hold this area down relatively well, even if both of the Gondorian armies come forward to try and get him. Umbar will be able to hold here. See, there's a lot of dead Corsair archers over here, but if the Athelian Rangers are willing to use their ammunition on Corsair archers, Team Umbar should be feeling very happy about that. White Wolf is moving some of his infantry around. Let's have a look here. This is a very scary Gondor skirmish line, to be honest with you. Let's have a little look up here into the guts of this fight. There's a lot of axemen here. There's a lot of arrow fire. The Ramas Ekor garrison was sent forward and they're already wavering. They are a militia unit. They're decent for a militia unit. Ooh, a bit of friendly fire there, but now the artillery has somewhat been equalised as a result of Deer Trap's catapult coming over here, and they'll now be able to fling their boulders across the river. And now the tables seem to be turning, because it does look as though Umbar are going to be advancing across the river themselves. The Gondor infantry is fighting to the death, but they won't be there for very long. This of course means that they can mount an assault out here, and with all of these troops over here, Umbar are definitely going to be able to smash this area to pieces, considering that those archers are really the bulk of what makes up the Gondor armies on the outside. Meanwhile, White Wolf is actually, again, Gondor are the ones which are willing to advance across the river, which surprises me, because Umbar were definitely the ones which I think had more advantages to be had in being more aggressive here. But the Gondor spearmen are going to collide with the Balagaya footmen. So again, this is going to be kind of like two glaciers rubbing up against one another. There are halberds, however, which will tilt this fight in favour of Umbar pretty substantially, and the Gondor infantry, which is backing up the spearmen, won't be able to stop that, as we see the catapult shots going off in the background. There's a lot of blue over on this part of the map, however. You can see that some of the Corsair archers are out of ammo, just being committed to the melee. This Gondor infantry again. This assault over here was relatively ill-advised, I think, particularly now that he's also sending forward his guards of Osgiliath, because the low damage Umbar archers are going to be able to get tons of value off the guards of Osgiliath. Having said that, they will be able to have a pretty substantial impact on the melee fight. That's a catapult crew. Someone had a catapult, which I completely missed, I assume. Oh yes, there it was. The catapult was destroyed. How about that? So the ballista was a very good pick from Moreau. Noah the Ranger is now also sending forward some of his infantry. Honestly, with the help of those guards of Osgiliath, a lucky Hussar is going to have to just try and hold out for victory on the other flanks, because Umbar will have victory on the other flanks. Too much of the Gondorian army is bottled up over here into attacking this one bridge, whereas Umbar have done a much better job, I think, of sort of spreading their forces out a little bit more. Gondor have advanced across this river as well. Rex White Wolf, despite having very limited resources within the settlement, is still attacking, which is quite ill-advised, because Engswitz's army is more than prepared to deal with these basic units that he's throwing at them. The Gondor spearmen are going to do their best, but ultimately there's just too many halberds over here, and they are going to be horribly outmatched. There's some Caer-Andros swordmasters over here, which are a very different proposition. They are a very good infantry unit, but ultimately the sheer weight of numbers here that Umbar has, and as soon as Rex White Wolf's infantry forces start to fall apart, that's going to be the cue for Engswitz to really push into the settlement and start to overrun them. Let's go and have a look at what's going on over the other side. You can see that there's the Castamir's Chosen, the Balagaya Halberds, and the Corsair Savages. And now the assault across the river that Boyd and Deertrap are going to mount is underway. And again, most of this Gondor army is archers, so the best they can hope to do really is try and scoot back and kite them. But that's not really going to work too well against Umbar, especially the Castamir's Chosen. They're going to be able to stand up to the basic archer fire all day long. Looks like these Ramas Equor garrison archers are just being sort of thrown under the bus to try and halt this advance. But ultimately I feel as though this isn't really going to get Gondor very far, and this might be where they lose the battle honestly out here, because eventually Deertrap and Boyd are going to win, and then they're going to be able to surround the high concentration of Gondor forces that are within the town. The Caer-Andros marksmen still trying their best. That Trebuchet's gotten a good amount of kills so far, but I don't think it's going to be good enough. The Trebuchet is very wild in where it decides to place its ammunition. If all three were to hit like a very nice blob like this, it could turn this fight around. But when it comes to dealing with morale shocks, Umbar are one of the stoutest factions there are. You won't see them running from a fight easily. Those Caer-Andros marksmen are out of ammunition and are going to be committed to the front. Just in time too, because the Gondor archers and Ramas Equor garrison archers are fleeing for the hills. And this is where having a skirmish heavy army in this sort of situation doesn't pay dividends. Umbar are just slowly but surely crushing their way through each defence that Gondor is able to put up. They do still have a force back here of primarily infantry, and they do have some Fountain Guard. But if I were them, I would commit everything forward at this point, because the Fountain Guard are going to be at their best in a situation like this, where you can sort of funnel the enemy into you. As soon as it turns into a wider fight, Umbar, with their numbers advantage in terms of infantry, are going to be able to take advantage of that situation. You can see over here as well that the Gondorians, Rex White Wolf's infantry, was simply not able to deal with the sheer force of the Umbar troops, and now Umbar are moving into the settlement, or at least they are moving across into the Gondorian territory. There are Gandalf's retinue bodyguard over here, and again, a good charge from the retinue bodyguard could be just the thing to deal with a lot of these troops, but again, a lot of it is Balagaya footmen and halberdiers, so the cavalry is not going to have the easiest time of it. Now these rangers are up on the hill as well, and the rangers will be able to get some good kills because of their body piercing, but there's simply too many of the Umbar forces here. And this is where Gondor are slowly but surely finding themselves a little bit bottled up over here. The ballista trying to get into position. This assault is still ongoing, however. But now, with the addition of the Castamir's Chosen into the front line, and more halberdiers, unfortunately even the guards of Osgiliath are not going to be able to hold up much longer under this sort of atrocious warfare. They took some arrow fire on the approach as well, which certainly couldn't have helped matters. But ultimately I would say Umbar hold the advantage on all fronts at this point. Umbar have just had a little bit more coordination about them. But we shall see. There are some very defensible positions that Gondor could take up and make it very difficult for Umbar to assault them. Because now the onus is definitely on Umbar to move forward. You can see that the Axemen of Lasarnak can move forward and try and stop the advance. This Gandalf's retinue bodyguard is finding itself being pursued by a lot of spearmen. That might be enough to break them.
We have lost half of our men.
Engswitz has lost half his men though. And it is a very even fight. Umbar are ahead. But I do think that positionally Umbar do hold a bit of an advantage. One of the retinue bodyguard does fall. There's too many spears here for the cavalry to be super effective. I'm very surprised, honestly, that the cavalry was not used on the outer reaches of the settlement. But it does look like Gondor are now in full retreat. They're trying to save whatever they can. Bretonk is moving his forces back here, and he will presumably try and defend this side of the settlement. But Engsvitz might well cut off these retreating troops from the vast bulk of the Gondorians in the top left of the settlement, which would be a real shame. But Rex White Wolf, they're trying to save what they can. But ultimately, Umbar are going to have their fair share here. They're not going to let them go for free. And this front line was destroyed, although saving something like the shielded Fountain Guard and 2 units of Fountain Guard, that's not an insignificant defensive line that Gondor could put up. But now Engsvitz is he sort of split the battlefield in half, which is good for Umbar, because it means that the pursuers will be able to catch up with the retreating Gondorian troops. And a lucky Hussar is slowly but surely inching this fight backwards. And you can see that every time Gondor send reinforcements up, it's just sort of basic spearmen and basic infantry. When what they really need is something of genuine quality. They need some Fountain Guard or something here on the front line, because Umbar have just got the quality advantage here. With the Halberds and the Castamir's chosen as such an effective frontline combination, that the basic Gondorians are good for just sort of a slog fight usually, but not against units of that quality, unfortunately. The arrows are continuing to fly just all over the place. Really chaotic in terms of a skirmish fight, but Umbar and Gondor have got a way of cancelling each other out in terms of the skirmish fight.
Half the enemy force remains.
And it will often come down in a situation like this anyway to the infantry. In an open field, the cavalry of Umbar would probably be enough to make them a little bit stronger, I think, in most situations than Gondor. Gondor would be forced in typical fashion to try and noob box it up a bit. But in this situation, I feel as though the infantry will be all important. Now, Gondor have got some shielded Fountain Guard on the front line. And the Castamir's chosen are good, but they're no match for the Fountain Guard, either variant, if they can get into a formation. And the Castamir's chosen, Engsvitz is going to need a little bit of help here. He does have some Corsair Blackguards, which were hidden. And this is going to be an interesting situation. The Wardens of Minas Ithil, actually, are up on this side, which is usually an outer wall for the defences. And they've got some nice missile damage in addition to some decent ammunition. And of course they are rangers, so they're going to be firing into the backs of the Castamir's chosen. So Engsvitz, he has moved most of his army across the river, and he is succeeding in sort of running a lot of interference between the Gondorian armies, preventing them from linking up. But the pursuers on the outside of the settlement are going to need to move in very, very quickly. These Corsair Blackguards are firing their javelins in as well, and they're going to be inflicting a fairly decent amount of damage as well. I think they're going actually to the Shielded Fountain Guard, which is an excellent target. Indeed, the Shielded Fountain Guard have taken... Well, actually, no, they haven't taken very many losses at all. They're just hidden by the trees. But just the fact that the Blackguards are able to get some nice kills here on no other Rangers' forces, it was the right idea to try and squash Engsvitz between the two Gondorian armies as they retreat, because you need to try and regroup here, Gondor, because if they're divided, they will be conquered. Over here we have some Balagai footmen as well. There are some infantry over here from Rex White Wolf, but some forces have been left behind. So the slightly depleted unit of Balagai footmen to try and hold back the horde. But Umbar are going to be more and more, going to be very quickly advancing upon their enemies. There's some cavalry interference being run out here by the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard of Muro. But ultimately the amount of damage they're going to be able to do against this sort of massive army is going to be very limited. They are very strong, but against all of the AP that Umbar have, particularly their halberds.
They have lost half their men.
These Balagai footmen are actually shaken already, which doesn't surprise me because they were taking javelin fire. They do charge into the javelins and actually make the javelins shaken a little bit before the javelins run, and the Balagai footmen are going to be very quickly swept aside, which is a bit of a worry for Engsvitz because he's got his troops. There's the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard. Noah the Ranger and Moreau are having to commit more and more forces over here to try and deal with Engsvitz's army. And he should lose this eventually, Engsvitz, but he has done a very good job here of dealing with the Gondorian pressure from two sides when he finally decided to advance across the river. Over here, meanwhile, the balance of forces is evenly matched. A lucky Hussar is running low on Castamir's chosen here on the front. What troops does he have left? It actually looks like he's going to be choosing a different method of attack. So Gondor may well yet outlast this over here. A lucky Hussar is starting to lose over on this bridge over here. And Engsvitz is going to struggle without reinforcements. You can see that the Gondorians are pouring into the settlement over here now, which means he's going to be attacked in the back. The halberds can try and get into a formation, but they have to cover both sides. The Naruna Aru Royal Guard are over here as well. They definitely don't want to be the target of the javelins if they can at all help it. If we have a look up here, we can see that again the retreating forces trying to get back into the settlement of Breton, the Gondor infantry, who were held up by the Belagaea footman. A lot of these Gondorians are just sort of trying to run away as quickly as they possibly can from Boyd and from Dietrap's armies as they advance forward. So move in here. That's a lot of Gondor infantry, and they will beat these Belagaea footmen. Of course, you can go through this building over here. But we've got some Naruna Aru Royal Guard over here as well. The Corsair Blackguards that are out of ammunition, so they're very eager here to try and prevent Breton from linking up with his allies that were in the settlement, some Nadu Tariq as well. But down here, Gondor are slowly but surely gaining the advantage. These Belagaea archers caught in melee, being finished off by a combination of Gondor infantry and axemen of Lasarnak. More forces coming across the bridge. Some Castamirs chosen from a lucky Hussar. The Harbingers are over there as well. Not a unit to be taken lightly, but really the Gondorian Fountain Guard is something that Umbar are going to always struggle to deal with in melee. They don't really have a concrete answer to deal with them because they're so good. Honestly, Gondor, they rely on the Fountain Guard a little bit too much perhaps, but there's no doubting how unbelievably strong they are. Meanwhile, the pursuers of Dietrap were coming over here, but all of the Fountain Guard from Rex White Wolf was left behind to hold up all of these Umbar troops, and they are succeeding. These Fountain Guardsmen are holding these Castamirs Chosen and Belagaea halberds in place. And they're also Corsair Savages. I mean, Umbar absolutely needs to get around and behind these Fountain Guard to do some damage to them. These Belagaea archers are also routing and broken off. But now, Rex White Wolf has got some of his troops over here as well. So we've got Axemen of Lasarnak, Pelagaya Marines and Gondor infantry. Dietrap's army might actually struggle to break through all of this, which would be... that would be tough actually for Umbar, because they're not really making any progress on the bridges anymore. Gondor have managed to throw off most of Engsvitz's army, which is now
the enemy force remain.
Mostly trapped up here. The Naruna Aru Royal Guard will be enough to deal with the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard, but those javelins are very quickly going to turn the fight around. But now they're actually being engaged in melee by the Nadu Tariq and the Corsair Blackguards. But the Naruna Aru taking a few casualties there. Their hit points are definitely going to have taken a hit from that. These Gondor infantrymen are horribly stuck, and now Boyd is going to be advancing into the settlement with essentially the full force of his army. The Wardens of Minas Ithil were over here, but they're there's 27 of them left, but they're so spread out, and the chaos is going to favour Umbar here. What's going on then? So Gondor are victorious over here. Let's go and see what's happening over on the bridge where a lucky Hussar was fighting against the Gondorians. This is where the first engagement happened. And it does look as though Gondor are going to be victorious over here. Although it would be a very Pyrrhic victory, to be fair. Neither side is going to come out of this looking too great. So it's a dead heat over here, really. Those Gondor archers are still firing. To be fair, though, Gondor are starting to run out of reserves over here as well. They've really got nothing but archers left over here, which they could commit elsewhere in the fight. And I feel as though if you look at the amount of blue on the radar, there are still some more Fountain Guard moving around. But I feel as though Boyd, having such a strong army left, will be a bit of a problem. This Gondor infantry being engaged by the Castamirs Chosen. The Harbingers of Castamir are also going to follow them up. If they can cut their way through them, they'll be able to attack the Fountain Guard in the rear. The Fountain Guard have done such a good job over here, though. Look at this. You can just see the carpet of bodies they've left in their wake. There are some Pelagaya Marines over here, but they're trapped behind enemy lines. They were going after the Rangers. But now the crossbows are going to be getting into position, and that's bad news for the Fountain Guard. They may have held the line resolutely thus far, but a few volleys from the crossbows and...
The battle is in our favor. If we remain true and wholehearted, victory will be ours.
Yeah, I think Umbar are going to take this. The Fountain Guard are good, but as soon as they start taking fire from Rangers and crossbows, or to be fair, you know, the shielded Fountain Guard is going to chase them off.
We are blessed.
There goes the enemy general.
Is dead.
That was the one up here
To hell.
from the Wardens of Minas Ithil, which of course means that Umbar are going to be able to surround what's left of Bretonk's forces up here. Although there's a counter surround from Muro as well, so there's more Fountain Guard. So Engsvitz's army is almost certainly looking very battered. In fact, it might be that these Naru Naaru are all that he has left. And the shielded Fountain Guard with their additional AP are going to be better than the Naru Naaru. Having said that, the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard was extremely damaged by them. Pelagai Marines in battle against the Blackguards.
Lost his stomach to fight. We must push our advantage.
That would almost certainly be Britonk's Gondorian army, because he was caught between a rock and a hard place there. These Athelian Rangers are firing in, which is going to be bad news for the likes of the Harbingers of Castamere, who are of course unshielded. They've got some very nice armour values, but the shield certainly helps as well. The Castamere's chosen over here. This Gondor infantry is not going to be able to hold for much longer, but fortunately Muro has just the answer for that. He's got some Fountain Guard moving in. Honestly, the Fountain Guard might be one of the best units in the game at the moment. They're so strong. And I think Gondor need it, to be honest with you, because without the Fountain Guard, I would rate them as being extremely lackluster. Corsair Savages trying to do what damage they can, but I'm unsure why Deatrap isn't trying to surround the Fountain Guard rather than just fighting them from the front. The Catapult is getting into position though, although the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard is on the hunt for them. But the archers are just continuously firing into the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard. They're going to try a point-blank charge into the... Nope, they are going to try and kill the Catapult. It's a bit of a suicide run, this, because there's rangers and archers and all sorts. Great timing, just as I was about to see the charge. Another Gondorian general falls, however. The Catapult is going to be destroyed, I think. Well, I don't know. The charge seemed pretty tame because they only killed 2 of them. And now there's AP axes and spearmen in melee. And that's going to be the end of the Gandalf's retinue bodyguard. The Gondorian generals are starting to fall all over the battlefield. And while this Fountain Guard defeat seems like a distinct possibility, I suppose that goes to show how strong the Harbingers of Castamere are if they can go toe-to-toe with the Fountain Guard. Over here we have another unit of Harbingers of Castamere moving forward. And even the Fountain Guard is starting to just creak and break under the sheer weight of numbers. Yeah, and it looks as though Umbar is slowly but surely pulling ahead in this fight here. Pelagai archers moving forth. Oh, excuse me. And the Corsair Savages got in behind the lines, accosting these Pelagai Marines. Pelagir, I should say.
Our men have fought long and are becoming tired.
I'm surprised Engsvitz has anything left, to be honest with you. These Athelian Rangers have pulled out their swords. Going to try and contribute somewhere in melee, but at this point Void's army is simply too big, I think. The Athelian Rangers are still firing as well. There goes another Gondorian general.
Now his men will lose heart.
It looks as though Gondor have had victory over here, though. The Castamere's chosen are still fighting the guards of Osgiliath. But Gondor are going to be victorious on this bridge over here, but everywhere else, I don't think they're going to have enough. It was a good back and forth fight while it was going on, though. Now these Castamere's chosen. Charging forward, the ballista has set itself up in a pretty decent position. But the Athelian Rangers are going to have to retreat. As the Castamere's chosen, retaking the other half of Umbar from their most hated enemies. I don't know, do Umbar hate Dol Amroth or Gondor more? I know that Dol Amroth basically is Gondor, but there goes the final Gondorian general. I would assume Dol Amroth, actually, considering I suppose they're the ones who engage most in naval combat. But yeah, these Fountain Guard are now horribly surrounded. This is the end. Pelagai archers are just sort of firing indiscriminately over the walls. Umbar are going to take the high ground as well. Pelagai Marines are routing and broken. The Gondor archers are fighting to the death, being hunted to extinction by all of these Umbar troops. Some Gondor archers were sent over here to try and stop the inevitable advance of these Castamere's chosen. Castamere's chosen. Now you can see their styling in the most effective relief here when they're facing off against the Gondorians directly. But with their heavy scimitars, they're just going to cleave their way through the Gondor archers. And at this point it's really only a matter of time, and Umbar are going to be victorious. That was an interesting match to behold. I would say that Gondor's comeuppance was really going a little bit too skirmisher heavy, because while your skirmishers are very tough and can engage in a skirmish fight, against Umbar you're not really gaining anything by absorbing their arrow fire, because Umbar are just like you. You know, they are built, their archers are entirely built around absorbing pressure rather than dealing damage. And here, Umbar's more infantry-heavy focus really helped them, because the Gondorian troops, they didn't really have a direct answer to the Castamir's Chosen, other than the Fountain Guard, and the Fountain Guard were in much smaller quantities than the Castamir's Chosen and the Belagaya Halberds. And also you have stuff like the Harbingers as well.
Flees the battle. Run down those worthless peasants.
So yeah, if I was Gondor, I definitely would have gone for a more infantry-focused build. You know, the Fountain Guard were obviously, you need the Fountain Guard all throughout your armies, definitely, but more Swordmasters would have been an interesting pick, I think. The Rangers were good. I like the idea of the Rangers, but you need to sort of hold them back and wait for a little while. I do think that Umbar overall in this sort of situation do have the beating of Gondor a lot of the time, simply because their infantry and their cavalry can be used to such good effect. In particular the cavalry, I'm honestly surprised we didn't see any warlords of Umbar, because Gondor have got nothing that can directly compete with them on horseback. There's the catapult. Still alive. And this is going to be the end. These guards of Osgiliath have been fighting for a long time, and so have these Castamir's Chosen, just this slogfest over here, but ultimately the battle was won elsewhere, and Umbar are going to be victorious. Will the catapult get a good hit?
Praise the Almighty.
That is the opposite of a good hit.
Has lost his stomach to fight.
That is some extreme. Well, those troops are routing. I think that's pretty much it. I think there might be some more troops hidden in this valley over here. Yeah, it's just these Gondor archers. There's no way these guys don't break almost immediately.
To praise the day before sunset, but our men are winning the battle and forging a worthy victory.
It will be a worthy victory. These Gondorian archers are going to break almost immediately, and that will signify the end of the battle. And there they go.
Thank God in heaven, we are victorious. Our soldiers have fought and died well today.
Umbar is reclaimed for its rightful owners. And there we go. And we can actually see the names as well, which is nice. So Engsvit's getting the most kills. Doesn't surprise me too much, because he was the one that advanced first. He was also the Umbar army which took the most losses. So again, he did essentially pay for getting the most kills. Dietrap getting the least, but again, I feel as though that was a result of him not being able to advance directly across the river to his quarry. He essentially had to follow Boyd essentially the whole map, or the whole match I should say, but he did a good job at supporting him, and ultimately the outer fight, as a result of Rex White Wolf kind of splitting his armies off into two sections, meant that the two armies of Umbar on the outside were able to beat the 1.5 armies of Gondor, particularly seeing as it was so skirmisher heavy on the outside. Having a look at the interior, Noah the Ranger not getting too many kills, and I'm not sure why that would be. I think mainly because the majority of his force was made up of just basic Gondorian troops, and that's not going to be a match for stuff like the Castamir's Chosen. And Engsvit's was really the one that took the fight to the middle, and Noah the Ranger's sort of relief force that he sent forward to try and help out the retreating Bretonk and Moreau. No, it was Bretonk and it was Moreau on the outside, wasn't it? Wasn't really gonna cut it. No wait, it was Rex the White Wolf on the outside. I'm going mental. But Moreau getting the most kills, and that doesn't surprise me either, because he had Fountain Guard, he had all of the right tools ready to deal with it. Let's have a look at what got the kills for Umbar though. I would imagine Castamir's Chosen doing decently. Again, trading very well with the Gondorians. Good for the Belagir footmen there. The Halberds are going to be good against Gondor all the time. Harbingers, but again, a lucky Hussar. He had the most grindy front to deal with. Having a look at Engsvit, who had certainly a smaller army, but he also had more quality in his force as well to make up for that. The Abrazani Nadu Tariq doing very well, one of the units at least. Corsair Blackguard's getting 200 kills again. The Javelin's going to be very good against Gondor. Again, good performance from his army all around, I think. Dietrap, again, one of his Castamir's Chosen getting over 100 kills. The rest of his army, though, was really just a foil and a support for Boyd. And again, some of his units getting over 100 kills. The Corsair Archers actually doing so. His archers were mainly the ones that got the kills, actually. So that's pretty impressive, considering that he was going up against a very heavy Gondorian skirmish force on the outside of the settlement there. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this Umbar battle. It might very well be the last one on 0.95 before the hotfix comes out, because it might be a little longer before my next video. It might be like 6 or 7 days even, rather than the 3 that I've been able to do thus far. But even so, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.